Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this special USAID Ukraine and World Council of Credit Unions webinar. USAID Credit for Agriculture Producers, or CAP project, is happy to present this virtual roundtable discussion, fostering resilience and recovery in Ukraine through credit unions. My name is Greg Newman, Director of Communications for World Council of Credit Unions, which has been implementing the CAP project in Ukraine since 2016. Before we get started, please take a moment to click Interpretation and choose your language, English or Ukrainian, to make sure you can hear all of today's presentations in your preferred language.
Перш ніж ми розпочнемо, будь ласка, натисніть кнопку «Переклад» і виберіть мову англійську чи українську, щоб ви могли почути всі сьогоднішні виступи зручною для вас мовою.
To mark the 75th anniversary of International Credit Union Day, which we will celebrate as the global credit union movement this Thursday, we've gathered several speakers, including Ukrainian and U.S. government officials and regulators and credit union professionals from both countries to discuss the ways they are supporting the Ukrainian credit union movement, including international best practices to better serve their members and community recovering from Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine. Joining today's virtual roundtable discussion are Kim Yi, Acting Director of the Economic Growth Office for the USAID Ukraine Mission, Dennis Sienik, he is the Deputy Ambassador at the Embassy of Ukraine in the United States, Kateryna Rozhkova, First Deputy Governor of the National Bank of Ukraine, which is the country's credit union regulator, Kyle Hauptman, Vice Chair of the National Credit Union Administration, which regulates credit unions here in the United States, Anthony Hernandez, President and CEO of Defense Credit Union Council in the U.S., Anatoli Murha, Chair of the Ukrainian American Credit Union Association, and Andrew Price, Senior Vice President of International Advocacy and General Counsel for World Council of Credit Unions. Well, there would be no Credit for Agriculture Producers, or CAP project, if it weren't for the American taxpayers who support the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID, which in turn funds the CAP project. Kim Yi is the Acting Director of Economic Growth for USAID's Ukraine Mission, and she will deliver today's opening remarks. She is a 16-year veteran of USAID with previous postings in Washington, D.C. and Afghanistan. Ms. Yi, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Good afternoon, all from Kyiv. Deputy Ambassador Sienik, Deputy Governor Rozhkova, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, it's an honor to join you today. First and foremost, I'd like to congratulate all credit unions on this 75th anniversary of International Credit Union Day. It's quite an achievement. Credit unions have a long history of serving and supporting their members and communities all over the world. In 1864, Mr. Friedrich Raiffeisen fathered the credit union idea as a way to help farmers secure finance in Western Germany. Ukraine followed the trend, opening its first credit unions in the late 1860s on both sides of the Dnipro River in the Galicia and Poltava regions. Today, Ukraine is fighting for its freedom. Ukraine's credit unions have stepped up to serve their communities at this critical time, helping to support Ukraine to resist and repel Russia's full-scale invasion. But despite Russia's missile attacks, power outages due to strikes on critical infrastructure, and personal tragedy and hardship, Ukraine's credit unions continue to serve their members and help displaced entrepreneurs, farmers, and micro-businesses alike. I've seen how credit unions have adapted to serve their members in these challenging times. They've developed sound financial services for small entrepreneurs and farmers. They provide affordable services to the dispersed and underserved rural populations where they live and work. Their unique structures encourage people to unite and create pathways that can improve lives. At the same time, credit unions need a strong enabling environment and regulations and laws to guide them and facilitate their work. In August, a milestone was reached as the President of Ukraine signed the new credit union law. This law marks a cornerstone for rebuilding and strengthening the sector, something critical for the recovery of rural Ukraine. Despite the uncertainty of war and economic disruption, this good work must continue. Cooperation and support will be needed across the sector and among all actors for a successful transition under the new law. USAID is absolutely proud to support the credit union movement in Ukraine through our Credit for Agriculture Producers activity, the CAP activity, which has operated for the past 7 years and has now been extended through 2024. We're committed to helping strengthen the credit union ecosystem and to helping the middle class to grow into an even stronger pillar of Ukraine's democratic society. Our work requires collaboration and cooperation. I'd like to thank the Ambassador Markarova for her leadership in building strong ties between Ukrainian and American credit unions, the NCUA, the Ukrainian American Credit Union Diaspora, and American credit unions for the technical and financial support they are providing to Ukraine's credit union sector. I'd also like to thank First Deputy Governor of the National Bank, Ms. Rozhkova, for her strong commitment to reforming the Ukrainian financial sector. A robust and sound financial sector plays an important role in the economic recovery of Ukraine. We look forward to continuing to work with you to support Ukraine both during Russia's war and most certainly after Ukraine has won the peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim, and we appreciate your time today. We know everyone here, by the way, is very busy, so we really appreciate everyone being able to join us for this, what we think is a very special event. And we're very excited and honored to welcome our next speaker, Denis Sienik. He is the Deputy Ambassador of Ukraine to the United States. He works under Oksana Markarova, who is the ambassador to the United States, and we know that all of them at the embassy have been incredibly busy and incredibly good about making time for us here at World Council. So we appreciate that. We appreciate your presence today, Denis. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Greg. Really great pleasure to be with you here today, especially. It's a great privilege to congratulate you on the forthcoming 75th anniversary of International Credit Union Day, which we will all celebrate. We celebrate on October 19th. As you know, starting from 1948, this day has been widely used to raise awareness about the tremendous work that credit unions and other financial institutions are doing in cooperate around the world, promote their achievements, and give members the opportunity to get more engaged. And we all know the history of credit unions, and remember that their members have never stepped aside in challenging times. And I just remember that during World War II, the credit union sell 12 million bonds, war bonds, with the purchase of 404 million, purchase price of $404 million. That equals today, if I'm not mistaken, more than $5.7 billion. That is the perfect example of how ordinary people can contribute to the victory of the whole country. And that is something that we all need today. It is the 600th day of Russia's large-scale invasion of Ukraine. And as our brave women and men fight today to defend democracy, to defend freedom, fight for Ukraine and beyond, so that Russia's aggression stops in Ukraine, doesn't spread further, so that other societies, other countries don't have to send their troops to fight Russians. As we are doing this today and pay a huge price, I want to thank everyone, the administration, US administration, Congress, on a strong bipartisan basis for the proactive stance in to hold Russia accountable for the invasion of Ukraine and the extraordinary military and financial support of our country. As I'm saying that, I really want to thank the credit unions, everyone, USAID, World Council of Credit Unions, Ukrainian American Credit Union Diaspora, for all the support that you provide to Ukraine. I'm talking about financial, humanitarian, and technical assistance. And the Ukrainian Credit Union Displacement Fund that was launched, the Worldwide Foundation for Credit Unions is just one perfect example of generous help provided to Ukraine by credit unions. I also want to emphasize the value of USAID and World Council of Credit Unions for agriculture producers project, which helps Ukrainian credit unions provide small and medium-sized farms and individual entrepreneurs access to affordable financial resources. And this project means a lot for us, and we are happy to work on it and cooperate with you. And as the war times, and especially during the post-war rebuilding process, it is crucial for such vulnerable groups as displaced persons, as returnees, veterans, representatives of small and medium sized enterprises to have access to affordable finances that could help improve the economic situation in Ukraine. And we have a great example of the US credit unions, which over a century have made a difference in communities across the country by providing critical financial services to people in challenging living situations. And we, in Ukraine, we are doing our best to provide credit unions with decent, proper conditions for their operation on the market. And this year, the new wording, by the way, of the law on the law of Ukraine on credit unions was adopted. It is effective of January 1st, 2024, but some of the regulations are already in place. I just want to underline the high importance also of the American credit unions experience for Ukraine. We are ready we would be actually grateful for a knowledge exchange with you, especially in strengthening the system of credit unions activities and creation of military credit unions, for example. And again, once again, I want to thank you all all the participants of this roundtable, the USAID, the World Council of Credit Unions, the Credit for Agriculture Producers Project, and all credit unions for supporting Ukraine. And thank you all. And on behalf of the entire people of Ukraine, and God bless America, glory to Ukraine, Slava Ukraini.
Dennis, thank you so much. We can't imagine the daily stress you're under. We can't imagine what you're dealing with. So to be here and to take the time to thank us, we just want to say thank you for being there and what you're doing. So we appreciate that. We appreciate your time. The CAP project's main goal is to strengthen the Ukrainian credit union market, thereby expanding access to agricultural credit. One of the ways the CAP project does that is by working with the country's credit union regulator, the National Bank of Ukraine, or NBU, to improve the operating environment for credit unions in Ukraine. Today, the NBU is represented by First Deputy Governor Kateryna Rozhkova. Ms. Rozhkova has been with the NBU since 2016 and has been working in Ukraine's banking system since 1998. She'll be speaking today about the strategy for credit union growth in Ukraine. Ms. Rozhkova, welcome, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much indeed. And first of all, I would like to tell you that it's a big honor. It's a big honor to be here and to thank the USAID. Thank you so much, the United States of America. Thank you so much, the American people, for your generous support in all senses and of all kinds that we receive, and which enables us to resist Talking the credit unions,
Якщо говорити
I
про
would
кредитні
say
спілки,
that the credit unions
кредитні спілки
indeed
є дуже
are a
важливою
very important
частиною
part
нашої
of
фінансової
our
системи.
financial system.
І на
And
сьогоднішній
today,
день,
when the whole
коли
financial sector
весь фінансовий сектор
faces enormous
стикнувся
challenges
з
associated
величезними
with this
викликами,
ongoing war,
пов'язаними з війною,
we, in a sense,
ми
we are very
певним
happy
чином
to
раді
state that
констатувати,
the
що
credit unions,
кредитні
as
спілки,
other
як і
actors
решта фінансового сектору,
in the financial
продовжують
industry,
працювати,
keep running, keep
продовжують надавати
providing
послуги
services to their
своїм
members
членам, там,
where
де
it's
це є
possible,
безпечно для
where it's
життя і
safe,
здоров'я
and
і
where the
працівників,
members
і
and the
членів
staff
кредитних
can
спілок.
operate safely and
Звичайно, з точки
effectively.
зору
And of course, supporting Ukraine,
підтримки України
supporting the
в її
restoration of this
відновленні
country
після
following the
перемоги,
victory,
роль
the role of
кредитних
the
спілок буде
credit
лише
unions
зростати.
will
І
be
в цьому
increasingly
контексті
important.
хочеться
And I have
сказати,
to
що
tell
ми,
you
як
that as the
регулятор,
regulator, we are so
щасливі, що
happy to
нарешті
see this
прийнятий
new
закон
piece of
про кредитні
legislation
спілки,
adopted. This new law is to
призваний
strengthen the
підвищити
financial standing
фінансову
of the
стійкість
cредit
кредитних
unions, to
спілок
support
і
the
їхню
credit
спроможність
unions, and to support the
підтримувати в
small
першу чергу
businesses all
малий і
across the
середній
country,
бізнес,
which is
що
very
дуже
important for the
важливо
Ukrainian
для
future after this
повоєнного
war.
відновлення
And I'm
України.
telling you
З
that the
цією
central bank
метою
today
Національний
is
банк
very active
зараз дуже
in order
активно
to
працює
develop
над
a
розробкою
bunch of secondary
нормативно-правових
legislation,
актів і
rules
регуляцій,
and regulations
які
that would
мають на меті
support the
імплементувати
implementation of the
основні
main
норми
provisions
нового
of this
закону,
newly adopted
в
law.
першу
First
чергу
of
в
all, it's
частині
about the capital
посилення вимог
requirements.
до капіталу
Second, it's
кредитних
about
спілок.
the system of
По-друге,
risk
посилення вимог
management,
до системи
the
управління
supervision and
ризиками,
control systems
систем контролю
in order to
кредитних спілок. Для того, аби
make
кредитні
credit
спілки
unions
були готові
prepared and well
приймати
equipped
активну
to
участь
support
у
this
відбудові
post-war
країни і
restoration
підтримувати
process,
наш
which is
бізнес.
why
І
we
тому ми
do
дуже вдячні
appreciate
і
all
сподіваємося
support,
на
and we put
подальшу
much
плідну
hope
співпрацю,
on the future
на
cooperation
ту
and support
допомогу,
from the
яку
US Agency
USAID
for
надає нам
International Development under various
в
problems
рамках
to exchange
обміну
experience,
досвідом,
exchange
в
knowledge,
рамках обміну знаннями,
under the
в рамках
programs to support
допомоги
us
нам, як
as the
регулятору,
regulator
в
to
формулюванні
improve
тих чи
the
інших
regulation, to improve the
регуляторних вимог,
legislation, to support
спрямованих
the
на
financial
посилення
sector.
сектору.
Thank you so
Дуже-дуже
much indeed.
дякуємо.
And thank you so much, Ms. Rozhkova. It's been quite a journey that we've gone on with the CAP project to see some of the developments with the credit union regulations, the credit union laws, and we look forward to developing more with the National Bank of Ukraine going forward for sure. Credit unions in the United States are regulated by the National Credit Union Administration, or NCUA. And today, we are lucky to have the agency's vice chair, Kyle Hauptman, with us. He was appointed to the NCUA board in June of 2020 and designated vice chair of the board later that year. Mr. Hauptman previously served as U.S. Senator Tom Cotton's advisor on economic policy, as well as staff director of the Senate Banking Committee's subcommittee on economic policy. Mr. Hauptman also has several years of experience in the private sector, most recently as senior vice president at Jeffries and Company. And Mr. Hauptman, welcome. You've got a message for us today about the role U.S. credit unions play in serving low-income communities and the military.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Greg. I think we can't not remember last March of 2022. In the American credit union world, you may know that our biggest event is called GAC. It's in March, end of February, early March, every year in Washington, D.C. And obviously, the topic is credit unions. There's thousands of people there. But last year, the other topic on everybody's mind was the invasion of Ukraine. Before events, at dinner, that's all everybody was talking about. It's when I first became aware of the Ukrainian American credit unions. I see Anatoli is speaking later. We know that Ukrainian American credit unions have been a key part of financial support for those in Ukraine. And we're pleased to see the Ukrainian government changing regulation to allow for expanded use of credit unions in So I'll talk a little bit about how they are in the United States. And I want to mention, obviously, much of the Ukrainian immigration to the United States is relatively new. It came in the generation since the fall of the Soviet Union. So I was very aware in talking to the people at Ukrainian American credit unions of just how personal this is. They have mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, up all night on Zoom calls with those in Ukraine. So it is what we call an ethnic credit union in the United States, but we're aware how personal it is and how many ties there are to Ukraine itself. Before I go any further, I want to say I'm at khauptman@ncua.gov. If anybody needs anything, if there's some way I can help, if there's more NCUA can do, it's my first initial last name at ncua.gov, khauptman@ncua.gov. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about America's 4,600 credit unions. So obviously, credit unions are in the financial industry, but they're a very different type. The cooperative model is different. Ukraine appears to be launching a new chapter for credit unions there. And I'm going to assume that in Ukraine also, the regulator will recognize that difference in financial model. NCUA is committed to ensuring our industry, the credit union industry, fulfills its purpose of serving the community, especially those with modest means and local businesses. Credit unions are not for-profit member-owned cooperatives or co-ops with a democratically elected board of directors, and they do not operate the same business as banks. They don't have the same purpose as banks. So as the primary regulator for U.S. credit unions, we at NCUA recognize that difference. Co-op is different. And we look to remove regulatory barriers that would prevent a well-managed credit union from expanding their membership or adapting the services to meet their member needs. We know that communities change. Rural members may need different services. They may need different loan structures. NCUA's commitment to regulatory relief from burdensome regulation recognizes that the individualized and the overall breadth of credit unions is a must. One example of a very different community that has different needs that America's credit unions serve is America's credit union. Is America's defense credit unions. That's America's military. They're on military installations all over the United States, as well as all over the world. So between our help for Ukrainian American credit unions and NCUA's assistance to the defense credit unions, who are obviously their members themselves, assisting in various manners with the war effort, we like to think we're doing what we can. But again, please reach out to me if there's more NCUA could be doing. I'll say this, that in the US, NCUA has a tailored risk-based exam system. We consider the size of a credit union, the financial condition, the community it's serving, all of that is considered in our regulatory framework. We try to proportionately tailor regulation for smaller credit unions, ones with a small amount of assets. We tailor things like reporting, audit requirements, exemption from our risk-based capital rule. They have simplified accounting rules for credit unions with under $10 million in assets. There are reduced capital requirements to start a new credit union. There are a lot of things like that where we try to tailor our regulation to the size and type of credit union that we have. NCUA was pleased to share its disaster experience with National Bank of Ukraine on credit union recovery. NCUA has a lot of lessons learned dealing with many disasters, including Hurricane Kateryna, that was in 2005, various floods, earthquakes, and many others. The key was to support the ability of the credit union to serve the local affected community. We want to allow flexibility, in some cases suspend briefly some rules and regulations and reporting, but we always have to keep an eye on safety and soundness. We're aware that a flood and an earthquake is not the same as what Ukraine is going through, but we're pleased to share any examples we have. And we're pleased to support the National Bank of Ukraine as it develops its supervision of credit unions and to share our approaches on various supervisory issues, such as it may be useful. And we welcome participation in ICURN, International Credit Union Regulators Network, where regulators around the world share best practices and knowledge. I want to thank you for this event. I want to thank you for inviting me to this event, and I'll send it back to Greg. Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle. And I know we've been, NCUA has been instrumental in making sure that NBU had everything it needed to be able to move forward, especially during this time of war. Our next speaker is Anthony Hernandez, President and CEO of Defense Credit Union Council, which represents more than 180 U.S. credit unions that serve America's military and veterans communities. Mr. Hernandez has been with DCUC since 2016 and served the previous 25 years in the United States Air Force, where he spent part of that time managing a $20 billion annual budget in support of the Air Force's Rapid Global Mobility mission. He's here to talk about the history of and segmentation of military credit unions in the U.S., as well as DCUC's collaboration with the NCUA. Anthony, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you everyone for joining this important roundtable discussion. Greetings to the Deputy Ambassador and the first Governor of the National Bank. DCUC sympathizes and supports the efforts that Ukraine is doing to defend their people and democracy as that country moves forward. On the subject of defense credit unions, the Defense Credit Union Council supports credit unions that focus on serving military members and their families as they prepare to go to war and while they're in combat operations and then after combat has ended. And so that's always been our mission going forward. I look at the situation in Ukraine and what's going on, and I look at the history of how our defense credit unions got started. And most of those, when you look back at their histories, it was the soldiers in a particular unit putting $100 into a briefcase or into a hat to form the basic foundations of their credit union, because they knew those families left behind were going to need something, either some kind of assistance to tie them through a difficult period or to make loans. And as that credit union was incorporated, these defense credit unions grew. And these were military members that knew each other, that knew how what was going on in that current unit and what the needs were. And so very powerful cooperative model that has expanded. And over time, these defense credit
Anthony, if I could interrupt you for just a second, I apologize so much. Our interpreter who is speaking, translating from English to Ukrainian, I think you're in the wrong channel. We're hearing you in the English channel. And so if you could make sure you're on the channel that was going Ukrainian, English to Ukrainian, we'd appreciate that. Thank you. And Anthony, I do apologize.
Okay, can everybody understand me now? Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. So these defense credit unions, when they were formed, these were military members that understood what was happening inside their unit going forward. And so they started making loans and covering assistance to military members, and they leaned forward, especially after the war had ended. And so the work of the Defense Credit Union Council is to support that effort worldwide. We have defense credit unions stationed in Europe, some very good credit unions that are still focused on that mission and how they lean forward when time of war happens. And this starts when the military unit gets in place and how they set up for any type of contingency that might happen. And when I talk about contingency, I'm not talking about military contingencies. I'm talking about financial hardships, especially if the member is killed in combat, and who takes care of the family after that happens. That's what defense credit unions do, is understanding all those life changes that can happen as a country, as a unit, as a community goes forward into war. And so we're very proud of the work that our defense credit unions have. We work with the NCUA to ensure we have a level playing field for our defense credit unions so they can continue to serve our military in combat. The last thing you want our military doing is worrying about paying the bills or the spouses and families left behind having the resources to survive. What you want your military member focused on is on combat, is on doing the job that their country has asked them to do, knowing that everything else is taken care of back home. Lots of things happen during war. Divorce is something that just happens, and so we want to educate our members and take care of them, going forward if that situation happens. Children needing educational funds. How do we take care of military families back home? These are things that the Defense Credit Union focuses on in times of war. After combat has ended, you have to rebuild the country. And working with U.S. military special forces, they're always in those communities trying to rebuild, either restoring waterworks systems, systems of commerce, educational systems. And that's where the entrepreneurial focus comes back into play. And lots of those entrepreneurs are former soldiers that were in those communities and going back to those communities. So having a member business lending program is very helpful, particularly for veterans coming back into their communities to rebuild. We're very proud of the mission that Defense Credit Unions have. We're available to answer any other questions that you might have regarding Defense Credit Unions. I apologize for the translation. I was trying to figure out which mode to click. So I hope everybody heard the message. But we're here to help. Please give us a call. My email address is Hernandez, so first initial, last name, @dcuc.org. Be happy to take your questions and refer to you. And also, we are coming overseas later on in the spring. We'll be in Warsaw, Poland, to further tackle these issues, address these with the with members of both the of Poland's national leaders, along with their credit union leaders. And we look forward to doing that. Welcome to invite any of you who want to take part in that. It's going to be a great discussion. And with that, I turn it back over to Greg.
Anthony, thank you. And just so you know, was not nothing that you did wrong on the interpretation, and we got your message very well. Thank you so much for being here. Credit unions represented by the Ukrainian American Credit Union Association have been a key conduit through which the Ukrainian American diaspora has been able to send financial support to Ukraine during the war. Today, the association is represented by Board Director Anatoli Murha, who is also the incoming CEO of Ukrainian Self-Reliance Credit Union in Philadelphia. He is here to discuss examples of serving low-income communities in the Ukrainian diaspora in the U.S. and to support Ukrainian credit unions in cooperation with World Council of Credit Unions. Anatoli, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Greg, and it's great to see you once again. I know we just had a chance to see each other recently in Washington. First of all, I do want to thank the World Council for hosting this incredibly important roundtable, and I also want to thank our fellow panelists. And I can honestly say that quite a few of the panelists that were here today I've actually had a chance to engage with in person. So specifically, I would like to thank I'd like to thank Deputy Ambassador Sienik, along with Ambassador Markarova. Also, I want to thank Vice Chairman Kyle Hauptman. He was actually one of the first that reached out to me in the early days, along with NCUA Chairman Todd Harper. But Kyle and I have had a chance to talk many times, and I just want him to know that our association and our members truly appreciate that engagement. And it's nice to be able to meet Acting Director Yi, First Deputy Governor Rozhkova, and Anthony. I thank you very much for your words and the incredible work that you're doing for our military. I do look forward to the opportunity of meeting you in person one day. I'd like to give a little bit more of a context of who I represent, because the Ukrainian American Credit Union Association actually has 11 member credit unions with over 120,000 Americans of Ukrainian descent. Our combined asset value is about $4.3 billion, and our member credit unions operate over 55 branches in 14 states. Our credit unions were formed post-World War II for Ukrainian immigrants that had to flee Ukraine. We're doing the same 70 years later. But we're not dusting off old plans from 7 decades ago, because we have consistently served generations of Ukrainians affected by war, those oppressed because of the Soviet era, and now again in wartime. Bottom line is this: we have an established infrastructure to jump to action and a strong tradition of supporting multiple needs. I want to acknowledge and thank my fellow colleagues in these 11 credit unions for their incredible lift of leadership for the past 600 days of war, from their management to their boards of directors and employees. I know that some are watching this roundtable today. In terms of examples, I'm going to share a few with you here this morning, or this afternoon for those of you in a different time zone. Ukrainians started arriving by the thousands through the Uniting for Ukraine initiative by the US government last year in 2022. Many of the new arrivals from Ukraine made their way to family and friends who were already in the United States. And much of that distribution was done to larger cities where we actually have credit unions. Our first objective as an association, our member credit unions, was to ensure that we can provide access to financial services, basic savings and checking accounts with debit cards. We want to make sure that people can buy the goods that they need and not have any barriers to entry. We also understand that in the United States, access to credit is essential. So we offered customized programs to offer introductory credit cards to build credit history. That graduated to offering auto loans. Fees. Members, new arrivals, and existing members that have been with us for decades have family and friends to support in Ukraine and other countries in Europe. Let's not forget that almost 10 million fled Ukraine and they needed that support. So any of our members that came to us that wanted to wire money to Ukraine, we waived the fees and we're continuing doing that as well. Our member credit unions have also donated to organizations that are assisting new arrivals. An incredible example of this is the Self-Reliance Association in Chicago. The Chicago-based Self-Reliance Federal Credit Union provided initial funding and ongoing support to the Self-Reliance Association, which has assisted over 10,000 new arrivals adapting to life in the United States. That association provides comprehensive services to new arrivals as a one-stop center, assisting those in need with completing applications relating to supplemental nutrition assistance program, cash assistance, health insurance, work authorization, Social Security, providing fee-free consultation with an immigration attorney, and more. The Rochester-based New York-based Ukrainian Federal Credit Union has worked with the Embassy of Ukraine to provide in-person consul services to its members across its branches in 8 states. And in Philadelphia, where I'm from, we now have funded 3 semesters of English as a second language for courses. And this was a collaborative organizational effort by multiple organizations in Philadelphia that we continue to enthusiastically support. And all of our member credit unions have donated to organizations providing humanitarian aid to Ukraine. So those are just a few examples. And I will say that anybody watching this webinar, if you happen to come across any of the Ukrainian American credit unions, feel free to contact us anytime. I'll give you my contact information later on. But from time to time, we are very grateful for those that reach out to us that have offered their assistance or want to know where to donate. We're happy to make referrals for you. Greg, you asked about the diaspora support for credit unions in Ukraine in cooperation with the World Council. I want to note that actually our member credit unions have been engaged with credit unions in Ukraine since the early 90s, providing different channels of support. However, in recent years, we have taken a more active role with the World Council as part of the Credit for Agricultural Producers project, which has been working in Ukraine since 2016. Since the formation of the Ukrainian Credit Union Displacement Fund by the Worldwide Foundation for Credit Unions post February 24th, 2022, we have been engaged with the World Council's Ukraine Task Force. We've also spoken at multiple events to continue raising funds and bringing more awareness to the needs of Ukraine. So moving forward, what do we see? We are excited about the opportunities that the new law in Ukraine provides to credit unions in Ukraine. There is technical expertise and best practices that our association, our member credit unions, and individual leaders can share based off of our extensive experience. Personally, in 2020, right before the pandemic, I visited a credit union in Cherkasy, Ukraine, which is southeast of the capital of Kyiv. And I know that other leaders within our association have provided other technical expertise through visits on virtual webinars and in person. Here's something to remember. I'm very fortunate that as an American and many of my colleagues in the USAID, language unifies us with Ukrainian credit unions in Ukraine. That way we can provide a high level of engagement since that language is not a barrier to entry or any barrier to communication. Part of these practices that we can see in the future include information sharing about how we have collaborated within our own credit unions to discuss new products and services. Also identifying expectations and needs from our trade associations. This is essential for growth and relevance. Should there be any mergers in the future, we can provide analysis considerations and other best practices for consideration. We've had multiple successful mergers within the Ukrainian American Credit Union Association. Another example is to share expertise within risk management and internal auditing. We are, like I said earlier, enthusiastic about the new law that's been passed in Ukraine. We think it'll strengthen credit unions, and we look forward to further professional engagement and collaboration. And much like Vice Chairman Hauptman said, I also want to underline and thank him and the NCUA for their high-level advisement to the National Bank of Ukraine. Greg, I'm going to share one more example, but this isn't necessarily about what was requested, but I do think that this is something very poignant for all of us here. In closing, I want to share a story. I was in the office one day in Philadelphia when a colleague's uncle was killed in the war. She learned in real time. Her work area is no more than 10 feet away from me. She was obviously visibly upset, and I talked to her, but she wanted to stay at work that day, saying it's better for her to be focused. I just ask everybody to let that sit for 10 seconds before anyone goes back to checking their phone and their email again. I have a leadership responsibility and mandate. I cannot sit idle. My colleagues and I within the UACUA leverage the resources that we can to assist new arrivals and amplify voices that are muted by rocket attacks. Friendship is truly the best gift that one can bestow on an individual and a country. I want to thank the World Council and all the credit unions around the globe and those attending this virtual roundtable that have demonstrated their friendship. Thank you.
Anatoli, thank you. And I have to say that I don't think there's been a better friend of the World Council, of the CAP project, of the Worldwide Foundation for Credit Unions here in the United States than you and your representation through your credit union and the Ukrainian American Credit Union Association as it relates to Ukraine and everything that's happened there over the last 18 months. So we really appreciate not just your time today, but in general, your commitment to that and your passion for it. And last, but certainly not least today, I want to introduce World Council of Credit Unions Senior Vice President of International Advocacy and General Counsel, Andrew Price. Those are positions that he has held since 2019. And Andy is going to talk to us today about the progress and the prospects for strengthening credit unions in Ukraine. Andy, sorry for the wait, but we're all interested in hearing what you have to say.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to this esteemed panel from the Ambassador's Office, from NCUA, Defense Council of Credit Unions, National Bank of Ukraine. I'm happy to say that I think the prospects for credit unions is very bright, and it's evidenced. I mean, number one, by the community that's present here today, that's here to support and to make sure that the credit unions continue to be able to serve their communities. We've been working on some of the reforms in USA, at least here at World Council through our USAID project for many years. I've been involved for six or 7 years now, working with them. A lot of the reforms were underway prior to the conflict, with the regulation being turned over to the National Bank of Ukraine, which I believe was a very positive step in the evolution of regulations for credit unions. And lo and behold, the conflict came along, and they were forced with keeping the credit unions lending during a time of crisis to help support the local economy. But also they received a whole bunch of new credit unions and are tasked with setting up a supervisory framework to regulate them properly, which would have been daunting in regular times, but is even more daunting during the course of the crisis. Why I'm very optimistic, though, is the level of effort and expertise that not only they are bringing, being a bank regulator, now having to regulate credit unions and understanding the cooperative model and the uniqueness of credit unions, but they've really been seeking out the best of the best and best practices. They've been working with NCUA, the United States, on some of their models. They're looking to adopt deposit insurance for credit unions. which I think is a very important development. And so the NCUA bringing their experience as a deposit insurer has been wonderful. But the number of countries that they've been working with, from Poland to Canada to Albania to Lithuania, looking for not only smaller size, medium size, larger size, to kind of get the best practices they can adopt for credit unions. All along, I've had a lot of conversation with them on proportionality, tailoring the regulations to work for credit unions, and they've been very interested in that. Just a little bit, Ukraine has had an association agreement with the EU for a while now, and part of that is to help adopt some of the EU banking regulations, at least in principle. And so they've been looking to a lot of the EU regulations, and so Poland has been remarkably assistant. That's a very positive step, I think, for the credit unions, because of the prudential standards that it brings. The ability to provide deposit insurance for the credit unions is tremendously important. And so when I look at what they're setting up for credit unions, I'm quite optimistic. They passed a new law during the middle of a crisis, which not only brings some more prudential standards, but the ability to serve SMEs and serve legal entities is hugely important, because it's going to allow the credit unions to grow and gets rid of some barriers to doing the type of lending, while doing a lot more of the lending that they can do. But if you think about the credit unions in agriculture, they're lending to farmers, those are businesses and small businesses and some of the cities. This is a tremendously important development, because it's going to allow the credit union system to grow. It's going to allow proper prudential regulation from the safety and soundness. I'm very excited about the work that the NBU has been doing, who they've been reaching out to, all of the tailoring of the supervision, the reporting, all of that goes along with it, that they're setting up and doing it in the middle of a crisis. So I will just end by saying what's going on in Ukraine is tremendously optimistic. I think the ability of credit unions to help Ukraine, what we hope is soon to be the reconstruction of the country, is going to take the credit unions are going to be in a position to play a critical role in that. And so I'm happy to have any questions, and I'll turn it back over to you, Greg.
Thanks, Andy. We actually do have a few minutes if anyone does have questions. Well, we have a question here, and I don't know who to ask this of, Andy, but I'll throw it out to you, since you're on here representing WOCU. And maybe you know about this, because I don't, but Tamara says, in the early 1990s, I had the great privilege, together with our Ukrainian American credit union, to work with USAID to host Ukrainian credit union leaders as interns to share best practices in promoting the credit union movement in Ukraine. Over the years, I worked with Rochester organizations to host COIL, sponsored by Open World delegations, on various issues. Wondering if WOCU would be able to organize a program to bring over Ukrainian credit union professionals for a training program at individual credit unions. Do you know about this from the early 90s, or have you heard about this?
No, I did not. Thank you, Tamara, for that. Boy, that's quite interesting. I mean, the answer to your question is please reach out to it. There's been a lot of exchanges that have been going on, not only from the United States, but from around the world with Ukraine. We're always happy to make associations to bring your technical experience to that program. I'm happy to hear a little bit more about what you did. I knew some of the USAID involvement from previous. I didn't know about the specific one, so I'm interested to learn about it. Thank you.
Yeah, and you can reach Andy if you'd like to email Andy. He's aprice@wocu.org, aprice@wocu.org. That's all the questions we have. I just want to note that I know a lot of people joined us today from Ukraine, and we really appreciate your time. We really want you to know that World Council and the Worldwide Foundation for Credit Unions are thinking about you every day, and that we're working every day to make sure we can assist in any way we can to help with the difficulties that you're growing with. So thank you so much for everyone who joined us today from Ukraine and works with our CAP project there. And I want to thank all of today's speakers, many of whom have very important jobs, very busy schedules, for joining us today, as well as the rest of our attendees here in the United States and elsewhere. If you'd like this event and you want to see others like it, you can refer anyone to the World Council YouTube channel at youtube.com/woku. A recording of this virtual roundtable will be available there later today. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Have a great day.